I'd say there are several goals. I mean, one goal is really to present the outcome of 2 years of learning. And I think there's two things we always have to bear in mind. One is that it's an art show. So we can look at it as the display of work by a group of artists. But the other is that, well, this is a school and they're students. So we're not just displaying art, we're actually displaying, if you like, products of learning. So it is to demonstrate what has been learned over the course of the 2 years. And that learning sort of encompasses a range of things. So technical skills, for example, how to use different media and techniques, but also conceptual thinking skills. So how to work with ideas and probably most essentially, how to connect the world of thinking, the world of feeling, that inner reality, which is non-physical, with the physical reality of objects, paintings, sculptures, videos, and so on and so forth. So that's doing that kind of meets both an artistic goal and a learning goal. One thing that is absolutely central within the whole thing, I mean, within the learning and within the exhibition, is the idea of coherence. So experiencing coherence and expressing coherence, and also inviting the audience into an experience of coherence, if you like. It's not just the presentation of separate individual art pieces, or again, if we go back to learning, products of learning, it's the presentation of things which are intrinsically connected in any one of a number of ways, and in most cases in more than one way. So for example, 2 or 3 works or a whole body of work produced by a student could be connected in a formal sense, in a visual sense. So when you see it, you see, okay, this student has used a particular symbol or a particular color in all of the pieces of work. The work can also be coherent in the sense of, while the individual pieces may look different, they may have been made in different media using different techniques. However, they all connect to one central concept, or aspects of that concept are evident within the individual pieces. Yeah, I mean, I think by degree, I mean, this is what every student aspired towards, and I would say, you know, they hit those goals, or that, if you like, that central goal of coherence with depth to varying degrees. But I would say that there are some bodies of work that perhaps did that more, in a way which is more evident than others, shall we say. Yeah, and again, you know, the learning process, very much like the creative process itself, is certainly not a linear one. Though there may be elements of linearity within it, it's much more organic. And what that means is that certain understandings kick in at different times and through different experiences for different students. So a student may, from the very outset, have a very, very strong sense of what they want their work to be about, and also how that central concern or idea can be expressed through individual pieces of work. Somebody else may work in the opposite way, in a sense, and just begin with experimentation or a vague notion of what they're interested in, and they gradually move towards coherence and kind of a conscious understanding of what they're doing. Some students, everything comes together at the end, which is very, very risky and kind of nerve-wracking for the teacher in particular, but also very exciting. And there were cases in which students, made great pieces of work, like literally days before the exhibition. And I think there's something about that energy, that build-up, that kind of opens the student, opens the artist to possibilities they might not have considered before. And even, we could say, small breakthroughs happen. So the way I see it, there are some shows which, as a whole, I think really work very strongly. And then there are other shows within which there are outstanding pieces, though as a whole, there's varying degrees of quality or various degrees of attainment of the central goal of the course. I think it's a really interesting question, and I think there's two ways of looking at it. I remember that one of the most famous artists of the second part of the 20th century, Frank Stella, said probably about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, being at the top isn't as great as you might imagine it to be. And then he went on to explain what he meant by that. And he said, everybody probably imagines that if you're a world famous artist, then you're completely free to do whatever you want. He said, actually, it's the opposite. He said, I am tied into so many contractual agreements. I have to produce X amount of pieces every year for this gallery, for that gallery. This gallery or this museum have commissioned me to make work, and it must conform to certain requirements and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of constraints that the most accomplished, the most famous, the most acclaimed artists also have to work under. And it's the same for the students here. They also have a lot of constraints they have to operate within. And the biggest one is, I would say, time, because unlike artists, working as artists within the world, or even full-time art students, these students have an extremely demanding art course that they have to thoroughly immerse themselves in, whilst at the same time being equally engaged with 5 other subject areas, as well as all the other things that pertain to the IB. So they have a tremendous amount of pressure on them. What is expected of them is a lot, not just in terms of you have to do this, 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 and this, but the level of quality that is expected, the depth of thought, the rigor of thinking, of critical thinking. So much is expected from them. And I think, there are so many different ways of looking at each situation. We could say that, and probably some of the students are thinking, I wish I was just an artist working by myself out in the world. The reality is that in a sense, students are since the focus is learning, there's a sort of purity attached to what they do. They don't have to produce work that conforms to the expectations of an audience. they have to produce work that is personally significant to them within the context of an understanding of the course and its requirements. So they have a lot of scope for experimentation and investigation. Having said that, they do really need to understand, as does anybody, the context that they are in. And I think the students who, if you like, do the best are the students who are able to integrate their understanding of the context they're in and the rules of the game, if you like. They're able to integrate that with their own personal aspirations and the freedom and space to make the kind of work that they really want to make work about. So when those two things come together, then, things are really happening, yeah. I think it has the potential to do that, but again, I'm not sure if it's accurate to say they're freer. I would say they have a certain type of freedom. But again, I don't think there's any form of freedom that exists without constraints. And freedom, I think, you could also argue, is conditional upon the existence of certain constraints or structures. So the students who understand the situation they're in, I think they get to experience a form of freedom which is authentic and allows them to be open to learning to things that they themselves might not have considered. There's a lot of misunderstandings about freedom and about art, and I think sometimes students sign up for the visual arts course because they think, well, art is a place where you can be free, and it's about self-expression and everything is subjective. Well, certainly there is freedom within the making of art. Certainly there is self-expression and there is subjectivity, but these things coexist with other things, including their opposites. So the student who is able to figure out how these different things connect with each other or can connect with each other, I think then begins to make work that has a maturity to it, has a depth to it, and has an authenticity to it. So yes, in that aspect, it does reflect things about themselves, also about things that are common to all of humanity. And I think that's when things really begin to work. When, instead of setting yourself outside of humanity and saying, I'm going to paint a painting about a social issue, or saying, right, I'm just going to express how I feel. When you're able to actually make a connection between those two things, between your interior life and what's happening in the world, when you connect those things, and when you're able to express that in visual form, then I think you're really onto something. And again, coming back to this cohort of students, everybody understood that was what they should go for, and everybody achieved success in various aspects. And again, for one student, it may have been 2 or 3 pieces that really did that very powerfully. For other students, again, there was more consistency, and the body of work, their personal exhibition within the bigger exhibition, really communicated that effectively. I think it has the potential to have a great impact. And I think, when we think about impacts, we think about immediate impacts, and then we think about long-term impacts. And, within this cohort of students, as with every cohort, there are students who are going to go on to study art or design, and their intention is to become visual artists or designers. For sure, what they have done during these 2 years, in a sense, will provide a foundation, has provided a foundation for their future and continued development. And so the impact will be very evident. There are other students who may go into other fields, and they may go into fields which do not have an obvious or close connection with visual art. However, I feel that having gone through the experience of engaging with visual art for 2 years, there are certain things that they will have learned, and certain qualities and dispositions, ways of thinking that are applicable within other situations, both professional and more importantly within life itself. So I am certain that there are impacts that we're seeing now, and that there will be long-term impacts of having done this for the students who took this course and created this exhibition. In terms of those who came to view it, those who are looking at the works, those who are talking to the students, talking to the artists, I think also there are impacts as well, because for sure, the work is about things that relate to all of us. And yet, what we experience when we see a piece of work is another individual's interpretation and visualization of that experience. And by presenting something to us that we may have experienced or felt or thought in a way that is unique to the artist, by experiencing that, we also get to think differently. We get to think about it from a different perspective, or to even just visualize it differently. So I think there's a transformative effect there. And I think that's what happens when you take a piece of work out of the studio space where it's made and you put it into a public space. It has been said by a number of artists that the work itself is not complete until it's been seen, and the viewer completes the work. So I think there is definitely a kind of dialogue that takes place when the work is viewed, and the viewer again brings their experiences, their visual culture and history, and their interpretations to the work. So yeah, so there's a transformation that goes on there. But I think also if the audience is then able somehow to share their understanding of the work with the artist, then that, there is that feedback, there is that cycle. And it was great to see during the opening so many people talking with the artists quite intimately about specific pieces of work and details within work, as well as overall shows. So, I mean, again, as an artist, you're alone with the work essentially while you're making it, and you have intentions, you have understandings, and you have new understandings and insights that emerge during the process, but still it's just you and the work. Again, when it goes out into the public domain, you have the opportunity to be, to be exposed to interpretations and perspectives that you yourself hadn't thought about. And I think that's a great situation to be in. Now, it's one that's not always a comfortable one, because it's like, I think we do still have the traditional, but I would say very outdated idea that the artist needs to be completely in control of everything and to be fully conscious of everything. That's a somewhat traditional and very much debunked idea. I mean, many artists don't think that way anymore. but still you see it kind of lingering on. So you see sometimes people are a bit uncomfortable when somebody says, well, actually, what I saw was. But I think, one thing that we do try to do within the course is to talk about interpretation, and to talk about the fact that people will see different things within the work. They will find different things within the work. And when they share that with you, it's an opportunity to reflect on the work, and think, well, okay, well, yeah, there's more to it than I thought. And what's wrong with that? I mean, you make a discovery within your own work through an interaction with somebody else. That can only be a good thing, ultimately. The program has the potential to be a very individualized program. And speaking personally, I tried to ensure that each student's experience of the program was as individualized and as personalized as possible. And the outcome of that is we have a show in which there are many great works, but if you look at them, they don't have a lot in common with each other. So one of the most frequent comments I heard during the exhibition opening was, wow, it's so diverse. And I think this is a really important thing for, as you mentioned, for younger students who are thinking of studying visual art, to be exposed to and to be helped to be made aware of that not all good artworks look the same. And again, it makes us also think about things like technical skills and what is the scope in 2024 of technical skill? What does it mean to be technically skilled in the visual arts? Well, it does mean being able to mix paint and to use your brush in a highly skilled way, but it also means being able to hammer nails into a piece of wood, or to work with sheets of cut acrylic, or to work with found materials and find a way to connect them, or to make a 3-foot dog out of yarn that is based on a balloon animal. So opening the student's mind to like the range of possibilities, I think is extremely important. And again, that doesn't mean anything goes. There still has to be quality and rigor, but it's a way of saying that, to do a good piece of work, you don't just have to do this, and not all good pieces of work look like that. This is good for its reasons, and another piece of work that may look absolutely opposite is good for its own reasons, and that has to be tied in with the artist's intention. Yeah, there has to be a lot, and the space that the exhibition, is making use of is a particularly challenging one to actually exhibit work in, because we hardly have any straight, flat walls. I mean, there's lots of curves, and there's lots of colors, and there's lots of things. So essentially what we have to do is, for the most part, create a space within the space. And then we need to think about, well, are there any pre-existing elements within, the space that we can also utilize? So yeah, we always have logistical challenges, and we, in a sense, we don't make things easy for ourselves, because we push students to be experimental, to sometimes make large-scale works, to make gravity-defying works, or things which are very ephemeral and delicate, things which are really kind of reflective of what contemporary art is today. It'd be much easier if we just said, right, you're all painting on canvases 60 by 40 centimeters, and then we'll just nail them up and put them on the display boards. But of course, nobody wants to do that. We don't want to do that. So it was very challenging, however, even though I know it's always going to be challenging, I'm never particularly worried about it because we have an absolutely fantastic team that works on it. So, I mean, you've got the students, student artists, the teacher, and other teachers who help. And then there are the guys who work for properties who help us with the physical installation of the work. And these guys are absolutely fantastic in terms of not just their, manual technical abilities, using tools and things, and knowing how to hang things, but I mean, really, they're engineers. They are problem solvers. They are creative thinkers, and I never go into a situation thinking we won't be able to do this. I have such confidence in the team based upon experience, I mean, years of experience of working with them, that even if I don't know how we're going to do it, I know that we will be able to figure out how to do it. And that's always the case. There is always a way. So that piece you mentioned was particularly challenging. Another piece that was particularly challenging was a very long scroll, which was elevated from the display boards with pieces of wood and then sort of hooks that were created to rest it. And I can remember after the day of the installation, returning home and proudly looking at a photograph of that work, 5 minutes later receiving another photograph from the student saying, "It's fallen down." So I had planned to come in early the next day, the day of the exhibition opening, to take photographs of the work, to work with Marco, the photographer, to document everything. And he did a bit of that, but he actually spent about 3 hours with me and the student and the middle school visual arts teaching assistant who just happened to pop in to have a look at the work. He ended up being roped in to help us fix this piece of work. Thankfully, the drawing had not been damaged at all. It was just the structure that held it. And it was one of those situations where, every solution creates a new problem. So we would fix something and then that would break something else. The suspense was beginning to build a little bit because, it's like 3 hours and then we're getting closer to lunchtime and then soon it's going to be the opening. But again, these things often happen, and there's excitement, there's adrenaline there, but one also has this built into one's thinking that, okay, there's always things that happen, right? And if you estimate it's going to take an hour, it's probably going to take 2 hours because there are things that you can't even see at this point. You can't even anticipate. But what you can anticipate is that generally stuff will happen that will need more time and more effort. Things will break, things will need to be fixed. You'll need to go and find a tool that you don't have with you or something like that. But again, with experience, you approach the event with this mindset. The rest is details. What breaks or what needs extra time. Well, that just happens during the experience of installing the show. And what is crucial and like central to the whole thing going well, essentially is relationships. So, if the team is able to work together, to collaborate together, if there's if there's confidence and mutual trust and respect and collegiality and friendliness and courtesy and warmth between everybody involved and patience, a lot of patience, then these technical things can be solved really easily. If there's anything that is going to make it more difficult, it's people getting worked up and getting testy and getting angry with each other. And that has never happened in my experience here at Webb. So, and this year was the same as well. So there's always a way. Things always work out.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're welcome. Hope that was okay.